What is taxation? What kind of taxes do we pay? Why do we need to pay taxes? Where does our tax money go to? And why is this conversation important? Now, if you're someone who's interested in this topic, then this conversation is right here for you. I'm Hakshala David, Junior Economist Innovative Financing, and I warmly welcome you all to the first episode of UNDP Sri Lanka's podcast series, What the Tax? So today I'm joined by two experts in this topic, Mr. Sudarshan Kasthurirangan, the Regional Program Specialist for the Taxation and SDGs Initiative of UNDP, and Professor Sirimal Abeyratne, Senior Professor in Economics at the University of Colombo. Professor Sudarshan, a very warm welcome to our first episode of the podcast series. Now, this initiative is started so that we unpack the conversation about taxation to the audiences, especially in Sri Lanka. And on that note, Sudarshan, first of all, taxation is interpreted in very different ways among different audiences, right? Some may find that to be a very technical term, something's quite subject heavy. Some may be agnostic about it, and some may even find that to be a scary topic. But in the most simple terms, can you break it down to us? What does taxation mean?
Sure, Hakshala. Thank you very much for having me. Good to be part of this initiative. I think it's a very timely initiative as well, especially not only from a Sri Lanka perspective, where things are happening across the globe with the poly crisis going on. It's imperative, public revenue raise and taxes play a major role. And that kind of goes back to your question as well. And you also use the term tax is scary. And I'm not surprised because Albert Einstein himself said income tax is the most complicated thing. So when it comes from Einstein, you can know how scary it is. But on a softer note, if you look at taxes, there's no one single definition. You can't legally define what a tax is because people try to define it. But to break it down, to unpack what is a tax, tax is basically what you want to get from your government, get from your public. That's why they call it a social contract. There are certain things which only government can provide. For example, the non-excludable goods, non-rivalrous good, air, water. These are all things private players cannot do it. So you need government to go do that, basic public goods and services. And in order for government to give that, they need revenue. And that's where we as citizens. So I wouldn't say it's a quid pro quo to say tax, but it is something which is essential in order for a state building. And therefore, tax is one of the fundamental policy levers, especially in order to get the necessary public goods and services for which government needs revenue, and tax help them to get that revenues.
Got it. Professor Sirimal, on that note, now in the context of Sri Lanka, there's this renewed momentum in terms of the conversation around taxation, be it the kind of challenges economic-wise that we face in the economy right now, and also, for example, the kind of tax policy changes that we are seeing at the wake of the economic challenges. So in that context, Professor, why is there a renewed interest in this topic in the context of Sri Lanka?
First of all, let me thank Hakshala and the UNDP for the invite. If you want to live in a civilized society, organized society, having better facilities from the government, we should pay taxes. But Sri Lankans are unfortunately not used to pay taxes in the history. And all our taxes were basically hidden taxes, that means indirect taxes. But also we have seen from time to time taxes have been manipulated and used for some other purposes, so that our tax payment system got distorted and the tax revenue declined substantially. But our expenditures, the government expenditure on providing these basic necessities and utilities that we need, and that got escalated over the time. So we got into a problem. that huge budget deficit. So in order to cover that budget deficit, we need more taxes. But however, the economic crisis, and we were brought into a situation that we cannot bridge this gap between tax revenue and the government expenditure. So in order to deal with this problem, finally we have been left with no other solution but of course go back to the basic principles and adopting the proper tax system. So that's why there has been a big hahoo now in the economy, among the society, among the people, about our tax system.
If can I just begin on, as Professor alluded to, if you take a few steps backward and scratch the surface, what are the ways the states can raise revenue? One is the public finance, and since your question pertained to why it's relevant now in Sri Lanka, what is the rigor for it in terms of the current context? Obviously, the other source of revenue is when you start expending more than what you get, then you have to borrow, and which is what has happened. And today we're unfortunately in this current economic crisis, especially from a Sri Lankan context. And to offset it, to have a more, kind of a broader view, you again need taxes, because again you can go back to the same old, your expenditure more than your income. Again, this shows the significance of why we need taxes.
Got it. Now, if we can take a couple of steps back, Professor, you just talked about hidden taxes, something that we don't realize, right? So what are the kind of taxes that we pay? And the other question related to that is it only the people who belong to the higher income bracket who pay taxes? Can you break that down for us?
Yes. Taxes are twofold. One, this is called direct taxes, which means that the people directly pay the taxes out of their income. Other one is indirect taxes. Indirect taxes are attached to the prices of goods and services that we buy, so that those are paid indirectly. So what I mean by hidden taxes is people don't know that they are paying taxes because that tax component is hidden in the price of what we buy. Now the problem here is when people pay direct taxes, everybody knows how much they pay taxes. And when we pay indirect taxes, of course, in a society like this, when you buy a loaf of bread and when I buy a loaf of bread, irrespective of our income levels, we pay the same amount of taxes. And that's where this injustice comes into tax system when we pay more indirect taxes. In fact, we have this anomaly between direct and indirect taxes because usually we had out of our total tax revenue about 20-25% tax revenue came from direct taxes, whereas the large part of that came from indirect taxes, which means actually large part of our taxes come from poor people. So that's why there is a massive injustice inbuilt in the present tax system, because we should move into the direct tax system, and it's not a policy decision that we are paying higher indirect taxes. It's actually it shows the weakness of the tax system because we haven't adopted technology, we haven't brought it into the tax system, we haven't brought into this database system into our tax system. So the government does not know people's income and wealth. That's the main weakness of our tax system. When the government does not know the wealth and the income of people, it is easy to catch as the government thinks by imposing higher indirect taxes. So our commodity taxes are very high, and so that it distorts actually our commodity market source.
Thanks for that, Professor. Since you touched a little bit about the relationship between the taxpayer, the people, and the state, the tax collector. Now, a trend that we are seeing in Sri Lanka right now, where there are a lot of people who are resorting to migration, for example, be it skilled or unskilled migration. And this is primarily because of the lower disposable income that people are currently faced with. And now that, coupled with the new policies that we are seeing, where, for example, people over the age of 18, now they need to register for the purpose of paying taxation. Now, these two combined, for an individual who's currently grappled in a situation like this, what do you say to an individual like that? I pose that to the both of you.
Yes, the new higher taxes came into effect this January of this year, 2023. And what I have seen that in economics, we talk about a concept called permanent income hypothesis. That means that we all are shaping our expenditure patterns not according to our fluctuating incomes, but according to our long-term average income. So everybody is doing that, so that people who got 300,000-400,000 rupees a month, they have borrowed money, they have built their houses, they have borrowed their money for their vehicles and personal loans and various kind of expenditure patterns, so that they have conditioned their expenditure patterns according to their average long-term income. Now they keep some amount of money for their basic needs for the month. So now when the new tax system come to the picture, what happened is that affect their living expenses, not their loans, not what they are paying to the government or to the banks, and not their bills, but on their living expenses. That means food and transport. So these are the things that got affected by the increase in tax rates in this country. So that's one reason why, actually, because we are not used to pay taxes, and taxes came on the top of everything that we had planned in the past. So, but in other countries, this is a system that they have been doing all the time, so that they know, even though they pay 40-45% taxes, and there are countries paying that amount of taxes out of their income, and even though they pay 40-50% taxes out of their income, they got used to it because their income levels are high. Even after they pay half of their income, substantial amount is left for their all other expenses. But in this country, when you pay 36% taxes, that's a huge amount because it's a new thing on their expense.
Got it. Sudarshan?
Let me slightly give a different perspective to it. Professor gave a more economic side to it, but the fact of the matter is today we have to live with it because that's what the law says. No one can question the contractionary policy of, why do we need to, but from a government standpoint, probably they want to increase the tax base. Having said that, be that as it may, the situation is that have to convince the individual, what is it that was a question to pay taxes. Now, obviously, it's not going to be easy, as Professor also mentioned. Generally, there is little, low level of tax compliance, or as I mentioned to you, the social contract. But as every adversity brings opportunity in terms of reforms, looking at it in a more optimistic way, this is the right time for the government. As much as they're increasing taxes, which they know is going to reduce the consumption, as you said, this is the time where they can ignite the tax morale or the strong cohesion between the state and its citizen. Professor also touched upon this briefly. Let's take Finland or even any of the Nordic. Almost 70-60% goes in taxes, and the tax morale is very high there. And people are happy to contribute taxes, even though they're forced, coerced. But the fact of the matter is, why are they happy? They're happy because the government gives back in terms of its safetiness, in terms of better living conditions, basic public. This is, I think, something which the government should also look at in terms of current crisis. Okay, get the trust back, see what much can be given back in terms of electricity. I know tough times, But these are the ways. And individuals, how I will put it, is this is a time for nation building. At the end of the day, it's the citizens who have to build the state collectively, and that's what tax is all about. So therefore, maybe these are some of the narratives which the government should look at in terms of bringing the individuals on board and contribute to the nation building, especially when it's down, time to bounce back and be resilient.
So building on that, what you're talking about, this collective effort that's required, where the citizens should come together in order to build the nation, right? So related to that is this topic about tax morale, or this importance to build the social contract. There's a bit of a buzz around that terminology, right? So for those of us who don't know what it means, can you break it down for us, Sudarshan?
Sure. See, when you look at morality itself is very subjective. What is right for me may not be right for you. So therefore, very difficult to define what a morality is. But having said that, from a tax morality standpoint, what needs to be done is, you also started off saying taxes scary. Taxes, unfortunately, seem to be unsexy, so to speak, not attractive. And we also use tax in a very negative connotation. I have very taxing day, taxing times. So look at the way they do it, taxes. So therefore, the point I'm trying to drive is, we need to make it look at least nicer, if not sexier. What should be done for it? Since Professor deals with university students, one thing we can do is have a tax movie night, binge watch all the time. There is a collection with a professor in US, which is a living document. And so far we've collected around 90 odd tax-based movies. And these are fun movies. For example, take Shawshank Redemption or Laundromat, which is on Netflix. So, they have a tax night for the students, and then, bring in the, education at a very early age, bring the narrative that tax is part of it and you're contributing to a better building. For example, cartoons, animations, there are various ways to build that. And once the individual knows that, okay, this is why I'm giving this tax, then his sort of morale increases. From a business standpoint, there are again various ways. Better the administration, give more certainty. This way, you also look, women generally have a better tax morale than men. Of course, in Africa, it's a different ballgame. But therefore, there are various ways to make tax more sort of a, obligation and something part of it. So again, as I mentioned to you, there are various ways one can enhance tax morality, which will help at the end of the day, state building.
Got it. Professor, building on the masterclass that we did, I think we should explore the tax movie night concept, certainly. But just adding on to that, this civic education, or this education tag to it rather, what is the relevance of building this tax morale, especially in the context of what's going on in the country?
Yes, I think we cannot have a Scandinavian type welfare system with Hong Kong type tax system. And we should understand this link between what you expect from the government and then how we can pay for it, because government is basically an institution which does not earn a single cent. Government use others' money to provide you the necessary services and utilities and social goods and public goods, all these things. So we need to have this education system so that people, because we are not used to, I stress the fact that we are not used to pay taxes and we are not aware of the importance of paying taxes in this country, and we look at it as an unnecessary burden. Of course, we know that is also part of the level of development of the country as well, whereas there are many people who cannot pay taxes because of their lower income level. That's all true. But even with those things, if we pay even 10 rupees, 20 rupees taxes, if we had that kind of system from the beginning, this would not have been such a big issue right now, because that awareness and awareness building is necessary. And if you want to have a better system, better service from the government, we must contribute to it. If we don't contribute to it, we don't expect. I remember that when the budgets were presented every year, many people from their background, from their own social and professional backgrounds, and they're having their trade union views, and they all have this kind of idea that we have to get relief from the government, and individuals also think that relief from the government regarding prices of commodities, regarding our incomes, salary increases and all these things. And then collectively they also think about the higher welfare system. But for all these things, what we don't think is that we have to pay. So to narrow this gap between these two sides, I think we need to have an education system to make people aware and to build people's morale about paying taxes.
I'm reminded about a joke by a senator and asked the question how to raise taxes. He said, let's give this narrative. Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the one behind the tree. So that way, you keep passing the bucking on others who are waiting. This is also ties up, how do we raise the taxes?
Yeah, true. Cool. So, in addition to this need for raising the broader awareness and education in order to build the tax morale, what are some of the systemic challenges that you see in terms of taxation as an entirety? I'll open it up.
I think Professor also mentioned in the previous, what requires is from the government as well. It's take two to tango. As much as we're talking about individual morality, businesses, improving morality, contributing, the government equally is responsible because, as he also mentioned, it's not government's money, it's the citizens who are contributing. So there has to be transparency, there has to be accountability. We have seen nobody even looks into, there's not much of debate that happens in the parliament in terms of taxations or even the, the audit reports that come out from the Supreme Audit institutions. So therefore, there has to be, as they say, charity begins at home. The government really needs to relook at in terms of how it's approaching, and that's when you sort of strengthen the social contact. Because today, why people are not paying taxes? They don't have that. The fact be said, they don't have the trust and the faith in the government. They eroded it. So therefore, it's a right. I believe now is the time. In terms of the government also try to bring back the trust in terms of showing transparency, making some rapid systemic reforms, show where the money is going, because I want to know where my money is being spent. I understand that almost 80% of public revenue of Sri Lanka goes on salary, wages, which is very significant. So which means all the money that contributes to taxes invariably goes to public sector employees and not for the welfare. So these are some of the things I believe needs to be resurrected, reinvigorated and look at it in a renewed approach.
Professor, your thoughts?
I think we need to look at not only the citizen side, but also as he rightly mentioned, the tax, how they spend taxes, because the government is an institution in which we have given the legitimate power to spend not its own money but others' money. So that if you have the power to spend someone else's money, we have to be very careful, because it's very easily you go wrong. So in that sense, I think transparency that has to be built into our tax system. Not only that, we are adopting these new ways of collecting tax system, and everybody required to participate in paying the taxes, but at the same time, the government, the authorities also have to show that they are honest with spending that tax money. So that's how the morale has to be built up, and then you collect more taxes from the people, and they also get used to pay taxes voluntarily.
So on that note, Professor, can you help break down the concept of what is the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yes. Now, there are a lot of, in this kind of societies, a lot of free riders. That means they get the benefit of all this government utilities and infrastructure that they build. They also make use of the roads and buildings and networks and all these things, the services and the public goods that the government provide, but they don't contribute to it, and only a very minority of the people contribute to that tax system. If you look at the direct tax system, so tax avoiding tax and evading tax, so these ways I think the injustice is built into the tax system, and this is also part of the problem that we are having, because we have to improve our tax efficiency in tax administration, just like the government has to improve its expenditure patterns and transparency.
Sudarshan, in terms of what's happening on the global front, now OECD, for example, takes the forefront in terms of global governance on the tax front, right? But recently, as of last year, the UN passed a resolution which designated the UN's role in tax policy. Now, what does that mean for the global south at large? And can you talk a little bit about the trends that are happening?
Absolutely. I'll answer this picking the thread from the previous question on tax avoidance versus tax evasion. Now, of course, wearing the legal hat, one will always say it's a cliche, thin line of difference between evasion and avoidance, whereas avoidance is legally allowed, evasion is one which you break the law. And avoidance is, again, courts have also, especially from the common law, exacerbated by saying you can always plan your affairs. Now, this is actually, largely exacerbated by the growth of multinational enterprises, corporates, and more importantly, what we need to also look at it is the concept of sovereignty. The sovereignty, as we know, was, citizen and the state. But today, sovereignty has also become mobile in terms of various nomad, and quite a lot of people can choose where they want to, globalization epoch. So therefore, there's significant amount of tax avoidance, evasions are also happening, and you have, the developed economy, so to speak, kind of, taking advantage of this growth in globalization epoch. Now, what UN has done very significantly, especially the General Assembly, in fact, tax going to General Assembly itself is a watershed moment, which has never happened. And this has been a long cry by many civil society groups and many from the global south in terms of, and from a governance standpoint, the developing countries were always the menu. They should ideally be on the table. Sad part that they were in the menu. So therefore, they were never part of the table discussing, getting their evidences, voices. And the December resolution of last year, where the General Assembly passed, unanimously, the voting went in favor of having UN to come out with a strong international financial architecture, which also includes having a tax body. Very early days still, but this has a very significant ramifications, positive ramifications for Global South, especially because today we will be sitting in the table and making the decisions, and it will not be the OECD, which has the tag of, in more pro-developed countries for just a rich member tag as well. So that sort of will get, blurred with UN coming in. You'll have a truly inclusive governance framework where you will have, and UN is the best place to do that, considering its membership and the especially SIDS region and various, they all have different significance and priorities. And therefore, that way, UN will play a very significant role in getting all the members' voice, perspective, and creating a strong international tax architecture, which would help sure that there is fair amount of distribution and not, one-sided. So this way, this will be very balanced. One need to wait and watch in terms of where it goes. We still have a long way to go to have a legal framework. But speed is picking up. There's significant amount of attention, and UNDP has also been doing its part in terms of helping Global South in getting their evidences and voice. The Tax for SDGs program, one of the output activities is taking the voices from Global South and taking into the table at the UN, and therefore ensuring that the country gets what it needs to generate its revenue.
That sounds very promising. So that brings us to the end of the first episode. Any final thoughts from the both of you?
I think we have come to the end of the road of playing with tax collection as well as tax expenditure in this country. So that I'm sure now by this time many have realized the danger of the system. So part of our debt crisis goes to the management of our tax system in this country. So that it has to be, we can't pinpoint any particular party or the government or politicians regarding this particular issue. And I would also add, our citizens, we all have contributed to this crisis. And part of the crisis is actually we didn't pay taxes. We expected more from the government, and government used to provide those things, borrowing money. And now we are in a situation where we can't pay those borrowing. So this is a good lesson that we learn with the hard knock.
My last words are, it's a fascinating time to be talking about tax, because all the countries, irrespective of developing, realizes the need for it. So my last words, this first episode of What the Tax is, it's not what the tax, it's wow, it's that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making yourselves available to record this episode. We should certainly revisit the idea about tax movie nights. And we look forward to having you come on board, hopefully for another episode. So thank you.
Tax movie review.
Yes. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Sudarshan.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
I'm Hakshala David signing off from the UNDP Sri Lanka podcast series What the Tax. Stay tuned for more.